Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will start in a few minutes, just waiting to see if a couple more people will join, and then we will start shortly. I'll just give it like 2 more minutes, and then we will hopefully start soon.
Hi, Norma. I just wanted to say that I got an email forwarded to me, but the link required a password. The way I got in was that the flyer, that link did not require a password. And I got a text right now, somebody had the same issue.
Huh. Okay, sorry about that. We didn't make it password protected, so I'm wondering why they required a password.
So the link in the flyer was how I got in, but the link that I got in an email, maybe it was the wrong link, but it did require a password.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you forward that link to them, our flyer, to the person? Or if you give us their email, we can send it to them right now.
I already did.
Oh, thank you so much, Martha.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why required it. Well, hopefully others didn't have that. Well, this session will be recorded, so even if they couldn't join, then we'll post it on our website so people can access it, and they don't need a password for that. But thank you for letting us know. Okay, so I see that I think that might be the person you were talking about. Martha Patricia Domingo has joined us. Okay, so why don't we get started? Oh, here's another person. Oh, Stacy begin. Great. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar for IFT grants. Since we're a small group, obviously feel free to turn on or off your camera. We definitely will stop to have certain questions, but feel free to just raise your hand. Actually, I'll go through some of the housekeeping stuff. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. So first of all, I want to thank you for attending this webinar on our Institute for Teaching Grants. We realize your time is precious and hope in these 45 minutes, we will provide you with some valuable information to get you started in applying for an IFT grant. My name is Norma Sanchez. I am the manager of CTA's Instruction and Professional Development Department and CTA's Institute for Teaching. My co-presenter is Bomi Musetti, our IFT program specialist, and we also have the pleasure of having our featured guest speaker, Cicely Bingener, who will talk to you about her IFT grant. We also have Adam Ibrahim. He's our technical person, IPD staff person / guru on technology who has helped us out on the chat and other questions that you may have. So let's get started. So first, a couple of housekeeping reminders. Everyone will have their microphones muted. There will be several opportunities for you to ask questions and interact with us. We will have some stopping points in this webinar to open it up to questions. And you can also use the raise your hand feature throughout the presentation, as well as the chat feature. All materials presented can be found on our IFT website at cta.org/IFT. And if you like a copy of this PowerPoint, please email us at ift@cta.org. So this webinar will include two parts. The first will be an overview of the IFT grants and how to apply. And in the second part, you will hear from Cicely on her experience with the recent grant she received and how it impacted her school community. So first, for some of you, here's a bit of some background on CTA's Institute for Teaching Foundation and how these grants are funded. Basically, the CTA Institute for Teaching was formed in 1967. It's a nonprofit side of CTA to support public education efforts. Since 2002, IFT has been under the umbrella of our CTA Foundation for Teaching and Learning, which is an independent nonprofit organization that supports CTA-sponsored scholarships for eligible members and their dependents, awards, grants, and the Disaster Relief Fund. IFT would like to thank all of our CTA members and their voluntary dues contribution of $20 to the CTA Foundation for Teaching and Learning. Your voluntary contribution support helps IFT to provide awarded funding to our strength-based teacher-led grant projects. So a central pillar of the IFT and the IFT grants is this notion of strength-based thinking. Many of you are probably familiar with this term, but basically strength-based thinking focuses on the strengths and assets of people's qualities rather than their deficits. As you can see on this slide, the left-hand side represents deficit thinking, while the right-hand side highlights the positives. So this ties into strength-based teaching and how we look at our students and support them in our classrooms. As you can read on this slide, students come to us with existing talents and skills. And as educators, we provide students with opportunities to build their existing talents and skills into personal strengths. Then students begin to realize their full potential when their personal strengths develop into their unique set of assets. So if you combine strength-based teaching with strength-based learning, you get the combination of existing talents and strengths with the acquisition of new knowledge and skills to realize the full potential of learning and growth for our students. So now we're going to provide you with some of the documents you will need to review for your IFT grant application. So this is the first one. On this slide, you see what we call our IFT Strength-Based Equity Matrix. It has 7 components, which are located in the middle, and they're described a bit more in the text. So thank you, Adam. Adam just posted the link. I know it's kind of hard to read on here. So he posted the link to the actual document, and that's on our website for you to review at any point. So I'm going to read to you very quickly just the 7 elements. I'm not going to read the description of each. They are student-centered, student equity, student advocacy, school-wide relations, school-family relations, community solidarity, and future-oriented. So for these grants, when you are applying, it's important for you to review the sentence that follows each one, because you're going to be asked basically in your IFT grant to respond to each of these 7 areas. There's a box for each of these where you will fill up to 500 words maximum to describe how your grant fulfills each of these areas. So I'll stop here just briefly. Any questions thus far? Feel free to just unmute yourself, raise your hand, or put it in the chat.
I had a question on the racial and social equity. I guess how to convey that, or does the project itself essentially paint that picture that it's something that's obviously going to be available to all students? I guess it just feels, I was an anthropology degree back in my undergrad, but it feels weird to be like, this is going to specifically benefit any particular ethnicity or anything like that. Just feels strange or odd when it really is just something that's being targeted to all students. So I guess anything you can clarify on that end?
Yeah, if you go back, Adam, can you go back to the last slide so we can look at the components? So basically, when you look at so let's say student equity, which is the second one, it says describe how your grant proposal will promote learning opportunities and access for all students. So we're not saying it's going to be for a particular group of students that your grant applies for. So we're thinking about equity. It's just thinking about what are the learning opportunities that all students will access through your grant.
It's the community solidarity one, I think, that threw me off a little bit, utilizing a lens of racial and social justice.
So describe how your grant project allows for networking and coalition building with community groups, organizations, utilizing a lens of racial and social justice. And I think here we didn't want to really define what the what your lens is, but basically from a social justice lens. I mean, it doesn't have to be based on ethnicity or race in particular, but does it satisfy a certain community component that allows for coalition building, let's say. I think here, this is a new component for us. So we're looking to see how these grants are the broad spectrum of how they would apply in a certain school community. So I think that you have some flexibility here, I would say, because we are, piloting, so don't be scared to say, oh my gosh, I don't know how this fits with my grant. Just think about your school community, I would say, and how it sort of brings people together.
Got it. Done. Just making sure I understood that in that part of the language. So thank you.
Yeah, we purposely kind of tried to make it as broad as possible. But understanding that race and equity and social justice are important for us, but it's not in terms of just one component. It could be, a combination of them in terms of a broader lens that we bring to these grants. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let me go over the actual grants. There's two types of grants that you can apply for. One is an educator grant, which can be awarded up to $5,000, but it could be any amount less than that. Typically, our educator grants are for individual CTA members. These grants affect a single class or program at one school site. The second is an impact grant, which has a maximum of $20,000. Our impact grants require 2 or more CTA members on the team. These grants affect more than one class, grade level, program, or school site. Our online grant application allows for a maximum of 4 team member entries if needed. But just to reiterate, for both of these grants, yourself and all team members must be CTA members, and we check the membership as well. And if you are the person applying, you would apply as a project coordinator. So now, actually, I have if I can address it, I have a question in the chat. Somebody applied to a mindfulness and didn't get accepted. If there's some reason And we'll go over some of the project and funding guidelines. Sometimes there's certain funding components that even though the project can be a very good project and its idea and its goals and its components, sometimes there's a budget piece that might have kind of dinged you. So we'll go over that. And also, if for whatever reason, if you apply and your grant is not accepted, there's always a process for you to speak to somebody that can walk you through and give you some tips as to why your grant was not accepted. So that's always an option. And you would receive an email with that information of who to contact to set up that appointment with a CTA staff person. Okay, so now I'll pass it on to Bomi, who will walk you through some specifics of how to apply.
Thank you, Norma, and good afternoon, everyone. For these next few slides in our presentation, if you would like to follow along online in a separate window, we'll put our IFT webpage link in the chat section again. And we'll start by referencing some visuals on this slide and on the next few slides ahead, which are going to showcase our online grant application that is posted online on our IFT webpage. As a reminder, these numbers that you see on this slide help reference and identify the order in which the member applicant would see when applying online. A CTA member applicant would first head to our IFT webpage as referenced by number 1. That's the first window you would see there. Number 2 references a visual look at what the online IFT grant application section looks like on our webpage. And you would just click apply here and to start an online IFT grant application. We want you to know there is a save and continue feature listed at the bottom of each screen on the online application. So no worries if you need more time to fill out a grant application and need to come back to it later. We are accepting online IFT grant application submissions from December 1st to March 31st. And all awarded IFT grant projects will be implemented in the next school year, which will be 2023 or 2022 to 2023. And here's our third visual view of the online IFT grant application launch page. After selecting the apply button, it will take you directly to this online IFT grant application, as you see here. But before you start to apply online, IFT would like to provide a few additional notes and tips to make your experience applying online a successful one. So what do you need to know before applying online? 1, think ahead about how an awarded grant project would help you in your classroom, at your school site, your school district. 2, which type of grant will you or your local association chapter be applying for? 3, have your grant project budget and timeline file attachments already completed? And 4, was there already a conversation with the local association chapter president about the intent to apply? You will need to know your president's contact information, such as their name and their email address for the online application. And once again, we want to remind you, there will be a save and continue option at the bottom of each page of the online grant application. So once again, don't worry if you don't have time to finish it in one sitting. So for the grant project file attachment, these are the documents that you need to prepare to submit. So you have the grant project budget and the grant project timeline proposal. For the grant project budget file attachment, you just need to make sure to prepare your documents to upload as a PDF, Excel, or Word doc. For the grant project timeline file attachment, make sure to prepare your documents ahead of time to upload as either a PDF or a Word. And this is also listed directly on the online grant application as you go through it, so that will help you. We also wanted to share with everyone another quick tip that it would be helpful to know also ahead of time what in-kind materials or additional funding you might receive from other organizations or even your school district. This in-kind question will be on the online grant application. And we have a visual example of a past awarded IFT grant budget This is the awarded grant project budget proposal from Inglewood Teachers Association. And a little later on, we will hear from our guest speaker, Cecily, on their awarded IFT grant project experience. Your grant project budget you create can be anything from a chart, a table, Excel sheet. Just know that as a reminder, the budget file attachments can be uploaded once again as a PDF, Excel, or Word document file. And once again, feel free to add your in-kind amounts on the grant budget proposal attachment as well. Cecily, do you have anything that you'd like to add about submitting an online IFT grant project budget proposal?
Yeah, I just like, I'm glad that you're showing the example, and it is a very simple budget. I think when we hear budget, sometimes as teachers, we're like, how detailed does it have to be? Do I have to, show the exact amount that something is going to cost? And really it's estimates. I mean, some of the stuff that I knew, like I knew what a bus costs in our school district, roughly. So I just want to encourage anyone on the call that, look at this example. It is based on just estimation, and as long as it's sort of a realistic estimate, right? You don't have to feel like you have to be a CPA, right, to come up with this type of budget.
And then on our next slide, thank you, Cecily, we have a visual example of a past awarded IFT grant project timeline. This once again was an awarded grant project timeline from Inglewood Teachers Association, who we'll hear again from later on about their grant experience. Your grant project timeline you can create can be anything from a graph, a chart, a table, Excel sheet, etc. Just know that once again, as a reminder, the grant project timeline file attachments can be uploaded as a PDF, Excel, or Word document. And as a reminder, please plan your grant project timeline for one academic school year. And at this point, Cecily, do you have anything that you'd like to add about the online IFT grant project timeline proposal?
Yeah, so again, I like that you're able to see here is a very simple layout. I just went month by month. And again, it's a proposed timeline. Of course, it was very strange applying while we were in the middle of, COVID sort of remote learning, and I wasn't even sure what the situation was going to be at the time, right? And we're kind of still there to some extent. So I would just advise, anyone who is planning, it's aspirational, what you put down. And so, for example, like we have yet to go on our first bus field trip because it's just recently been announced that they're allowing that again. So we're not going to be able to hit all of these sites, but at the time, I acted on the best information that I had at the time. So I think I would advise people to just, write your aspirational timeline. And we kind of all understand, because of these unusual circumstances that we're in, that we may or may not hit everything on that timeline. But sort of shoot for the stars and land at the moon, or shoot for the moon, land among the stars kind of thinking would be my advice.
Go ahead. And all of these helpful grant application reference documents listed on this slide are also posted on our IFT webpage. So feel free to follow along again in another internet browser window. We'll add the website links and separate document links in the chat section for you. And what documents will be helpful to review before applying online? Number 1, the grant eligibility FAQ. 2, the grant applicant checklist. 3, the IFT grants do's and don'ts, funding guidelines. 4, the IFT strength-based equity matrix, IFT equity matrix. We'll also be going over these more in depth in the next few slides, with the exception of the IFT strength-based equity matrix, which we already covered earlier. So first off, these next few slides will provide a quick up-close look and visual reference of what we just talked about to help you review before applying. So here's the grant eligibility FAQ. Feel free, once again, we'll put it in the chat, the link to the document if you want to see it more close up. And our online IFT grant applications are intended for CTA member applicants of the local association chapters only to apply. And here's the up close look at the grant application checklist, which is also posted online on our IFT page. We'll also add that link in the chat for you if you'd like to take a closer look at it up online. And did you know that your local association chapter will be the fiscal agent for the awarded IFT grant? We want you and your local association chapter to know that without this filled out local association page, fiscal agent agreement, your IFT grant application will not be considered complete for submission. So this page is automatically emailed to your local association chapter president after your online grant application is submitted. So as a reminder, it will be considered an incomplete grant application if we don't have this part of the application filled out. And it looks like we have a question.
I have a very specific thing. We are currently in a larger chapter and literally in the process currently of creating a smaller local chapter within our district. But as of right now, we're, my card says this other one, but by the time this grant is actually being issued, we will be our own chapter.
So I think what you would, yeah, I think you would apply as of now, like what you have now. Who is your president? Because do you know when specifically the small chapter would be finalized?
We're literally waiting for them to pull our funds out of our joint checking account and provide transparency there, since that's where all of our dues have been going. So it's going to be happening like in the next month or two, but probably not until after I have hit the submit button on this grant. And I don't want my funds to end up going to the previous chapter.
Got it. So I think what you could do is you can email us and give us that specific information so that we make sure once, if your grant is accepted, that we know properly where to submit the funds to and send them to.
Okay. And where would I email specifically?
At the email ift@cta.org.
I just wasn't sure. I just want to make sure. It was just the general one. Okay. Thank you. That was a very specific question.
It looks like we don't have any other questions, so we'll move on. And this, I'll toss it back to Norma.
Okay. Yeah, so this is actually a really good document to review that some people skip over. Please do not skip over this one because this kind of will help you in developing not just your budget, but kind of the concepts and ideas behind your grant. So we developed this guide or a kind of flyer to develop all the do's and don'ts of funding. And so I know that there's a lot of detailed bullets in here. So I'm going to give you guys just 5 minutes to review, and we'll come back and then I can answer very specific questions here. So let's see, I have 4:30. Let's come back at 4:35 as a group to answer any questions that you may have. But if you have a question, please come back earlier than that. So I have a few minutes. I will say that one of the biggest don'ts that people do on these grants is, so definitely review the don'ts column, but they typically, a large portion of their grants goes to technical equipment or any type of equipment. And that, I know that's one thing that will probably not be funded if most of your grant is towards equipment. The other piece is if your grant requires a lot of release time, that is also something that is not probably going to be funded. A third piece is if your grant also is utilized for staffing or the hiring of a person to do professional development or other type of activities for your grant, that will also typically not be granted or awarded. And the reason being is because these grants are a one-year grant. And so you have to think about the capacity to grow teachers in their learning and their growth. And it's not sustainable after a year if the grant is solely used for external purposes or the hiring of certain individuals or the development of a center of some sort. While they're great ideas and great concepts, we look at the longevity of a program and its ability to really sustain growth internally. So those are some of the biggest don'ts. Any questions? I'll open it up here for any people that have more specific questions on this part. I know, like Cecily said, don't feel overwhelmed by a budget, but also think about where your expenses will be. Where will the majority of your expenses be? As we saw in Cecily's, hers was around activities, field trips. It was all related to the students. And that's okay. That's what we want. But if they're used to hire somebody or to release people or to attend conferences, then I would tell you those pieces are the ones that typically are not awarded. Okay. So I think with that, now is the moment you've been waiting for. I'd like to introduce you again to Cecily Bingener from Inglewood Teachers Association, who will talk to you about her IFT grant.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, once again. So yes, I am Cecily Bingener. I am actually a TK and kindergarten teacher in Inglewood. So my project is actually a little interesting because I'm not actually doing it at my school site. I'm actually doing it with continuation high school students in our district. So that's another thing I just want to point out, that sometimes we as teachers, we may have an idea that expands beyond the borders of our physical, school building. It might be something in a district that we feel that there's a need, or that we feel that we have a skill or a talent to, provide. So that's another thing. Don't be limited in terms of, what I really want to do is not with my students. I want to do it with somebody else's students, or, I want to do it with a different population. So in my case, I really, had a feeling around continuation high school students in our district. We have a small continuation high school that serves about 85 students on average. And I had been thinking a lot about it and reading a lot about, the need for teachers. We all know this was, in the early part of the pandemic, but even before that, we were hearing that, teacher shortages were projected, and just thinking about pathways, educator pathways. I say, CTA, IFT, all of this is about growing capacity, and we also have this very real need in the larger world for teachers. So with that idea in mind, I wrote a proposal for this, what we call the Future Inglewood Transformative Educators Club, which is essentially an education career, pathways club. And I wanted to pilot this club at the continuation high school in our district. And that was for a couple of reasons. One was I had done some like a case study at the continuation school. And when I went there and spent time, I learned that, they don't have clubs at all. There's just, really kind of bare bones, there's no activities for the students. So I thought, this is a ripe, sort of field where we could plant something. And then also I was attracted to the fact that the school is very small, a small population of students. So it's felt like it was, not so overwhelming. Let's say if everybody wanted to come to the club, I thought, okay, 85 students, it's a lot, but it's not 2,000 students, right, trying to sign up at like the comprehensive high school. So I wanted to make it, realistic and doable. So I went ahead and applied for the grant. And again, it was, when we were still in remote, and I didn't know if we'd be able to be back in person, but thankfully we launched formally the club in October of 2021. And it kind of lined up nicely because that was College and Career Awareness Month. So it was just a perfect time to launch it at the school. And now we've been meeting continuously, except for, the school got put in quarantine for a couple of weeks. But other than that, we've been meeting consistently every Thursday during the lunch period at the school. So here's just a few sort of photos that I was able to take. On the far right, you'll see me outdoors. And so this was sort of, again, I'm going into an environment where I'm not known to the students. I wanted to think about how to sort of get them interested. So I started the first couple of weeks, I just would show up at lunchtime. I had my little speaker, I had a little table, and we kind of did like a lunchtime patio party, if you will. And the students started drifting over to the table. We started to have lines of people, people were interested. And it was kind of a soft launch, I called it, just to get the students curious about it. Why is it called a fight club? So that we did that for the first couple of weeks. And then we secured a room on the campus that we could meet in at lunchtime. And that's what we've been doing ever since. So as far as my budget, it's 100% for programming and for a lot, just feeding kids. So we have snacks that we provide at lunchtime, at the lunch meeting. They're teenagers, so eating is top of their list. But it really gives them a chance, to kind of fellowship and be in a space that is, non-academic, but yet they're learning a lot because we spend a lot of time just exposing them to possible careers in education, including teaching, but not exclusive to teaching. So we talk about, being an educational researcher, an administrator, a counselor, pretty much any career pathway in that is education related. And we've had some speakers come out. We had the mayor of Culver City, which is an adjacent community here in Inglewood, came out. So we've had lots of volunteers who've come and spent their lunchtime. And they're very willing to do it because it's very, time controlled. The kids have to go back to class right after lunch. So we have about 45 minutes in which to, do all of the activities. And what's really been exciting is we actually also applied to present at a CTA conference, and we'll be presenting this Saturday, in fact, at the CTA Equity and Human Rights Conference. So it's been an amazing journey. Like I said, we didn't get to do all of the bus field trips that we wanted to do just because the district was not allowing those things at the time. But we're staying on budget. We're actually under budget right now. So, I'm hopeful that we can, start something and build it, going forward. So it looks like we'll have funding, at least to continue it through next year as well. But yeah, so it's just been a really amazing journey. And I'm really grateful to CTA that IFT exists, because a lot of times as educators, we have visions and dreams of doing things, but we always are limited by money and time, right? Those are the two big things that sort of obstruct us. But IFT really steps in and helps with the money piece. Time, they really can't do much about that, but certainly not having to think about the expenses really does free up a lot of the mental energy involved with trying to get these programs up and running. So I'll stop there, and if anyone has questions or comments, it's completely open to that.
We have a congratulations, Cecily. It is very inspiring. Somebody commented
Yeah, thank you.
about your project.
Thank you. I feel inspired. But again, if your project has nothing to do with, what mine is doing with it, I would like to encourage you that whatever your, vision, whatever your need is in your school community or in your classroom or in your district, just go for it. Absolutely apply. And the process is not too taxing as far as applying for grants. I feel like it was a good process for me to have to think about why I was wanting to do what I'm doing, so it's good reflective professionally. But yeah, I believe anyone can complete the application process successfully.
Thank you. Oh, you have lots of praise and good comments in the chat, so definitely read those, Cecily. Well deserved.
Thank you.
So that's the end of our webinar. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have gained some important insights in applying for an IFT grant. Please email us at ift@cta.org if you need any further assistance, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you would like to stay on and have a specific question, I'd be happy to stay on and see if I can assist in any way I can. But if not, thank you so much, you guys, and you have a wonderful day.